You ever see a headline and wonder, what's the real story here? How does one thing happening over there connect to something else way over here? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. Let's look at Saturday, April 25th, 2026. On the surface, it looked like a bunch of random, separate news events. But when you start to dig in, you see they were all part of one single, deeply interconnected story.
So our day starts with a massive jolt, right, in Washington, D.C. The news wires just lit up with this huge security alert. And, when that happens, the entire world pretty much stops and pays attention.
Okay, so here's what went down. It was the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. Suddenly, a suspect is arrested, and they're armed with guns and knives. Thankfully, President Trump was totally unharmed. The Secret Service? They were on it in a flash, evacuating him from the venue. Now, the official word came out pretty fast. They believed he acted alone. But still, what a tense, dramatic way to kick off the day, right? But here's the thing. As scary as that was, that incident, it wasn't the real story. Think of it more like a symptom, A sign of a much bigger, global fever that was spiking. The actual event, the one that truly set everything else in motion, was happening thousands of miles away. And this is the heart of it all, the real earthquake of the day. After years and years of tension just bubbling under the surface, the high-stakes peace talks between the US and Iran and Islamabad, Pakistan, they just completely collapsed, fell apart. So, how did we get here? Let's just walk through it. A few weeks earlier, in early April, there was actually a lot of hope. US envoys were planning the whole mission. But then on April 24th, just the day before, Iran's top diplomat just leaves. He bolts from Islamabad early. That was a huge red flag. By the 25th, it was a done deal. President Trump made it official, canceling the US mission. And just like that, bam, the door to diplomacy slammed shut. And what happens when talks fail? Well, the first and maybe the most dangerous ripple starts to spread, and that is immediate military escalation. And wow, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Literally hours after the talks collapsed, President Trump puts out this order. It's direct, it's crystal clear, and it's for the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical oil choke points on the planet. I mean, the language just flipped from negotiation to confrontation in the blink of an eye. And you have to understand, that shoot down and destroy order, that wasn't just a message for Iran. Nope, that was a signal to the entire Middle East. It basically said the old rules are gone. And just like that, the whole region goes on high alert.
And look, here comes the first domino. It happened almost immediately. Citing the collapse of those talks in Islamabad, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu announces they're resuming strikes in Lebanon. And at the exact same time, we're getting reports of new strikes in Gaza. So that diplomatic failure? It's no longer just words. It's now very real, very physical military action.
Okay, so that's the military ripple. But the shockwaves didn't stop there. Not even close. The next wave of consequences was all about economics and politics. We're talking about stuff that reshapes alliances and puts a ton of pressure on the whole global system. So the US decided to hit Iran where it hurts, the wallet. They moved fast to tighten the financial screws. And to do that, they looked east, pointing the finger directly at China, which, is one of Iran's biggest economic lifelines. So how do you do that? What's the tool? It's something called secondary sanctions. And this is really important to understand. The idea isn't just to punish Iran directly. It's to go after anyone, any company, any country, anywhere in the world that does business with Iran. It's a way of isolating them completely. And they weren't messing around. The targets were huge. The U.S. Treasury went after a major oil refinery based in China, plus 40, that's 40, different shipping companies. The whole point? To choke off a revenue stream that they said was funneling hundreds of millions of dollars to Iran's military. I mean, this is textbook economic warfare. But this pressure campaign, it started causing problems closer to home, creating some serious cracks in America's oldest alliances. The fallout was even starting to be felt inside NATO. And get this is pretty wild. A Pentagon email gets leaked, and it suggests the U.S. is actually thinking about suspending Spain, a fellow NATO member, from the alliance, all because of friction over how to handle the Iran conflict. That just shows you how incredibly high the political stakes were getting. So at the same time these old alliances are starting to show cracks, what's happening on the other side of the world? New ones are being built. On that exact same day, April 25th, India and Russia signed this landmark defense pact. We're talking about deploying soldiers and warships on each other's soil. This is a huge deal. It's a major strategic shift, basically creating a whole new power access that sits completely outside of those traditional Western-led security groups. All right, so let's take a quick breath. Because, the world doesn't just stop for one crisis, right? Life goes on. And April 25th was a really busy news day for a whole bunch of other reasons, too. It kind of paints a picture of a planet that's just juggling a ton of different challenges all at once.
Back in the US, for instance, another huge global force was in the headlines: climate change. Health officials put out a major alert, saying, hey, get ready for a potentially really bad year for tick-borne illnesses. And why? It's a direct result of our changing climate patterns.
Meanwhile, over in the tech world, things were buzzing. The Chinese company DeepSeek just rolled out this huge, long-awaited update to their AI model. Now, this isn't just some boring software patch. Think of it as the latest move in this escalating global AI arms race. It's a whole new kind of battlefield for world powers. And the headlines just kept on coming. We had militant attacks in Mali, a major assisted dying bill failing in the UK Parliament, and then all these warnings about flight cancellations because jet fuel costs were spiking, which, if you think about it, is probably tied to instability in, yep, you guessed it, the Middle East. But wait, there's an even more direct link. Over in Sudan, a regional war which has connections back to Iran was causing this absolutely catastrophic medicine shortage. So you see, the ripples from that one failed diplomatic meeting, they really did touch everywhere. Okay, so let's pull all of these different threads together and connect the dots. This is exactly why it's so fascinating to just take a snapshot of a single day's news. When you do, it's like you can suddenly see the hidden wiring of our whole global system.
The chain reaction is actually crystal clear when you lay it out. Step 1. A diplomatic failure. The talks between the US and Iran and Islamabad fall apart. That immediately leads to Step 2. Military escalation. You get the shoot-and-kill order in Hormuz, and Israel resumes its strikes. And that triggers Step 3. These huge geopolitical shifts. We're talking US sanctions on China, cracks forming in NATO, and this brand new pact between India and Russia.
So here's the bottom line, the big takeaway. The collapse of those talks in Islamabad, that wasn't just some regional story for the back pages. No way. It was the epicenter of a global earthquake, and its shockwaves were felt everywhere. In the Strait of Hormuz, inside the halls of NATO, across the shipping lanes of Asia, and on the battlefields of the Middle East.
And all of that leaves us with one last really big question. If anything, the events of April 25th, 2026 are a powerful reminder of just how tightly connected our world really is. So in a system that's this interconnected, you have to wonder, where does the next ripple come from?